And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a new video. In this video, I want to show you one game of the FIDE World Blitz Chess Championship, which happened in New York City. And yeah, there was a lot of drama there, including Magnus Carlsen and the whole Gene Skate and yeah, many other things as well. But in this video, I want to have a look at one of my games from the Blitz section, which was against the very famous content creator Eric Rosen from the United States. And I want to start off this video by saying that he and many others, but I specifically also want to mention Eric, was also one of the inspirations for why I wanted to start my own channel, since many of my friends who started playing chess later on in their life, they came to chess through people like him, because Eric is one of the persons who is able to make chess very interesting, especially for beginners, I think, with his whole Stafford Gambit series and so on. Many cool videos. And yeah, I just wanted to say that before we jump into the game. So I really look up to him specifically, and people who create content like this, who just attract many different people to start playing chess. So I wanted to say this before we jump into the game. So let's have a look. This game was played in round 7, I think, of the World Blitz Championship, and I had the white pieces. I think I lost the game before that, and was paired against Eric. So I had the white pieces, and I started off by going knight f3, which I mostly did in the tournament. He went d5, and I went e3. Which is not the move I mostly play. Mostly I go for g3, which is also the move I recommend in my Reti course for the white pieces. But in some games, I just wanted to go for this very slow system with e3. The point is, I just want to avoid all theory at all, basically, and just want to play some Queen's Gambit with the tempo up, basically. By the way, I didn't go e4 on purpose against him, because I didn't want to run into his preparation here and didn't want to get checkmated like, I think, Ehrenburg, Grandmaster from the USA, got crushed by Eric in like 20 moves. So I didn't want to run into that, so I chose a more solid opening. So I went c4, e6, this is all pretty standard here, b3. Of course, white has many different setups. He could also go for knight c3 followed by d4. But usually if white chooses this setup, he goes for the queen side fianchetto with the bishop. Eric chooses one of the main systems, which is b6. Another option for black is to go c5, immediately occupying the center, and then going knight c6. Often it will lead to some isolated queen pawn position like this. And when white later on pushes d4. But with this move order, actually this doesn't work for white as well, because black has some immediate ideas with bishop b4 check. So black even has some ideas here to push d4 himself, I think, after bishop e2. This is one of the lines, if I'm not totally wrong here, when black often sacrifices the pawn on d4, but black is fine last time I saw this. There is also bishop b5 right away, which is also a totally different line, just to mention that. But Eric chose b6, which is one of the most solid continuations here. I went bishop b2, bishop b7, knight c3, knight bd7, and here I went rook c1. Just to briefly mention, I also played the line with d4 in the past, and after bishop b7, bishop d3, there is this nice idea for white, bishop a3, which I even played in the Olympiad, where I won a pretty nice game in the last round. Idea is just to exchange this passive bishop in white's camp against black's very active bishop on d6. But this happened in the game, rook c1, a6, just preparing bishop d6, since if black would go bishop d6 right away, it could run into knight b5, or cd followed by knight b5, when black would have to give up the bishop on d6, which he really doesn't want to do in these positions. So he went a6 to prepare bishop d6, I went cd, ed, and here the very mysterious looking move knight e2, which is in fact a pretty common idea in this position, because usually white wants to go g3 followed by bishop g2 and then short castle. But here if I go g3 right away, d4 is a big issue, because I cannot take, because after queen e7 check, I have to block the check on the e file, and he will just win a piece on f3. So therefore I play knight e2 to prepare g3 followed by bishop g2. And here he played g6, which is probably not the best way to continue. Of course, it's not a big mistake. G6 is a very logical move. But I think it's a bit better for black to put the bishop on d6, like c5 followed by bishop d6. And I would have probably went for g3 anyway, but here black is probably fine because he has this counterplay with b5, and now after d4 he can always push c4 when black is arguably already better because he has this nice central advantage on the queen side. But he went for g6 instead. By the way, the point of knight e2, also if bishop d6, white sometimes has these ideas with knight d4, threatening knight c6 and knight f5 in some cases. But he went g6, intending to fianchetto the bishop on g7, g3, bishop g7, normal development happened here, rook e8, knight f4, another typical idea. The knight later on, after I push d4, will go to d3 in many cases, as happened in the game. I played d4, knight e4, and here another quite a common idea, rook c2, which I played in the game. The idea is to get queen c1 and then to increase the pressure on the pawn at c7. Also, rook c2 is a nice move because in many different lines, the bishop on b2 is protected. Now, if c5, I can often take on c5, and yeah, my rook protects the bishop on b2. So he went a5 here. Often having the idea of bishop a6, just gaining space on the queen side, queen c1, and now bishop f8, bringing the bishop to d6. So yeah, this is what I said before. It's probably better to put the bishop on d6 right away, since on g7 it's not doing that much in many cases. Rook d1, bishop d6. By the way, instead of rook d1, knight e5 immediately could have been an improvement, because now if he takes, the pawn d5 could be a big weakness. Rook d1 is coming next. But I played rook d1, bishop d6, and now bishop a3 immediately. Again, maybe not the best. I could play knight d3 first when, again, I'm threatening knight e5 in some cases. So he would probably have to stop it with f6 and only then to go bishop a3. That would maybe be a bit more precise. But I went bishop a3, queen e7, I took on d6, knight d3, and he anyway went f6 to stop knight e5. Knight d2 now, and here he went for h5, trying to get some counterplay on the king side. Objectively, computer is not a big fan of it, but practically speaking, it was not so easy to handle. The computer still sometimes wants to go c5, but it's a very hard call to make in many cases because yeah, all of the queen is on the d file and everything could open up. So this position is already pretty unpleasant for black. Also f5 is, I think this is the computer's top move, but it's not a move you want to make at all, because now I will play knight f3, knight e5, and I will have this nice square on e5 for my knight. So I went h5, knight f4, king g7, and here I took on e4 and went h4. The computer was also suggesting moves like knight f3 and then knight h4, some ideas like that, just targeting the pawn on g6, but I wanted to get rid of this pressure here and play h4. Fixing the pawn structure, but still he will have some ideas with g5 later on, so maybe h4 wasn't exactly necessary here. He went king h6 to prepare g5, protecting the pawn on h5. Now I played d5 to have this square on e6 for my knight, knight c5, and here things started to go a little bit wrong for me after rook d4, because I really underestimated his moves, which will come shortly. Instead, bishop h3 would have been much better, hitting the rook on c8, and only after rook d8 to go rook d4, because if he goes g5 now, which he did in the game, after knight e6, he cannot really take here, because the pawn here will be protected, and also now the rook is not on c8 anymore, and I will be able to take on c7 next. But I went rook d4, and he found a very strong move g5. I took, went knight e6, and here what I missed is that he has this move queen e5. I was only thinking about queen takes e6, when after rook c7 I'm probably just winning because the bishop on b7 is hanging, and I'm threatening rook d6 next. But he spotted queen e5, and now after rook c4 things really started to go wrong for me, because again I kind of completely misjudged the position, I would say, after c5. Instead of rook c4, I should just go rook d7, I think, and then take on c7 when the position is probably around balanced, even though the king on h6 is still somewhat weak, so I would still take the white pieces here. But I thought this exchange sacrifice here is interesting, but after queen f6, actually the king on h6 is now very safe, and pawn on e6 is a weakness, and yeah, white's position is already a bit worse, and practically it wasn't easy either. I went queen c4, already a big blunder, and after rook cd8, f4, here I was lucky that he didn't find the best continuation, which is also not that easy to spot. Rook d6 is the best move by the computer, just trying to pick up the pawn on e6. The more human way, I would say, is to take on f4 and then go rook d4. I also didn't see that when here it also turns out that black is winning. But he went rook d1 check, king h2, and now rook d2, which gives back the advantage to me. Keep in mind, this was a blitz game, so yeah, the game cannot be 100% accuracy. I think both of us played pretty well actually until here. I went rook e5 now, and by the way, instead of rook d2, the best is still to go rook d6 and to go after this pawn on e6. He went rook d2, and I went rook e5, g takes f4, again, somewhat of a mistake. g4 is better, but again, not an easy move to find at all. G takes f4, I took back, rook e7, queen c3, and here he gave back the exchange, because otherwise, let's just say he goes to d6 now. I have this nice idea of rook takes h5 check, and I'm winning the queen because of the discovered check. So he took here, rook takes e6, and here I took on e6, which is, yeah, a big mistake, because I missed something here. The best move is queen e3, which I saw during the game, but what I missed was that after rook takes e5, f takes e5, queen g5, I have king f3. This is the whole idea, and the resulting pawn endgame will now be winning for me. I was only thinking about just taking here when probably black will just be winning, because he will pick up this pawn here. And yeah, if the queen endgames here are probably also just a draw, like if I move my queen, it should be around equal. So yeah, I missed that and took on e6, and yeah, now it's an equal endgame, but still many things happened here, as we will see soon. So here he started pushing his pawns right away, which also I pretty much underestimated. I went queen c3 to get some counterplay behind his king, but now he just came running with the king, and all of a sudden it was pretty unpleasant for me to handle, because this pawn is just very fast. And some moves later he was winning. I think this was the point. Queen h6 is quite an unnecessary check, I think, because after king g1, the queen on h6 is more misplaced. He should go c2 right away, when I think he's just winning here. I think the point was if f6, he can move the king, and if both players promote here, in the end, it will be checkmate on h1. So he went queen h6 check, king g1, and now c2, f6, king b1, and yeah, now many checks started, but there was a big turnaround later on. Here, obviously, I was just hoping for a draw, because the pawn is threatening to promote with the check. But he was trying, and at the very end, here, king c1 already surprised me a bit, because it gave me the chance to advance my pawn even one square further. Otherwise, he would just have to settle for a draw, probably, in this case. But here, here he played king a1. And this was a move that already shocked me a bit over the board, but I was on 5 seconds and I could not see the way to win here, which actually is not so hard to spot. The winning idea is queen a3 check, which I played, and after king b1, now not to give a check here, but instead to promote to the queen. And I was just scared somehow that he will promote with the check, but actually I'm just winning here, because in all of these cases I will just have queen f1. So maybe I was also too low on time to even promote with to promote to a queen without losing on time. That could also be one of the cases. But yeah, after f8, it's just winning. If he promotes immediately, it's the same story. I can just take, and yeah, then queen f1, and I would be winning. But instead, I went queen b3 check, and somehow I thought it's just a draw. And after king a1, here I took on c2. And now the whole point of the video, how Eric Rosen tricked me, queen h1 check here, which I saw when I took on c2, but as I said, I didn't really see this whole idea with f8 here for some reason. So I allowed this, queen c2, and after queen h1 check, king h1, it's quite a nice finish of the game. Actually, after the game, I was thinking if I could play on here with king f2. I'm quite sure it's a draw with many different reasons, but I thought if he does something like this, then I definitely have chances. Probably still a draw. He probably has a perpetual here, but he has to be very careful that I cannot block any of the checks. But yeah, he should have many different points here. For example, queen g3. This should somehow still be a draw. Probably he will even win the pawn by force on f7. But yeah, this was the game. Quite an interesting one with many twists and turns. So I hope you guys enjoyed this recap of this one specific game from the World Blitz Chess Championship. If you did so, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And otherwise, I will see you in the following videos. Take care, guys.